Tell me about a time that you got fired from your job for an actual good reason.
So I just become an EMT and had a baby, and I went to work at an ambulance company in New Jersey, and they paid a whopping $9.50 an hour, and I couldn't survive on it, neither could my family. So I went to Pennsylvania, and I got a job at a second ambulance company there. But the New Jersey company had a non-compete clause. They didn't want you working anywhere else. And somehow someone from the New Jersey company saw me working for the Pennsylvania company. So they pulled me in the office and they asked me, "Where's your loyalty at?" And I say, "My loyalty is with my family. I'm making $9.50 an hour here." So I went to another state to work. So they fired me. And I was like, "Thank you, bye-bye." So right now I'm on my way to a public power rally with the Bronx Greens and the Bronx Upper Manhattan branch of the DSA. Public power means that we want our electricity, which right now is in the hands of Con Edison, a monopoly and private company, to be in public hands and democratized. More videos to come.
But this is only the first step, right? We have to convince our neighbors that there's an alternative. We don't have to convince them that Con Ed is bad. We have to convince them that there's an alternative and public power is the way forward. So the way that we do that is through phone banking and canvassing, right? We have phone banking shifts starting every Wednesday and Sunday. Sign up. You guys, if you signed in, you're gonna get an email, I'm sure, probably, or a text. We're gonna bug you. But before then, go to the website, sign up for a phone bank. This is how we're gonna win. The same time, next Sunday, April 18th, we're gonna kick off our actual in-person canvassing. We need to touch people where they're at. Some people don't pick up the phones. We have to actually touch them in person. It's springtime. We've been inside for the whole last year. Let's get back outside.
Hey, you can start right now.
Okay, we're here with James. James, tell us about yourself.
So how you doing? My name is James Dennis. I'm a DSA, NYC DSA member. I'm a Bronx resident, lifelong Bronx resident from the Northeast Bronx. Just passionate about doing the right thing and trying to get a green infrastructure, getting the right type of infrastructure made, and to get the wrong type of for-profit.
Tell us about public power, what we want.
So what we want in public power is public control of utilities, right? For-profit utilities, public utilities, like I said, is a contradiction. It shouldn't exist. Things that go for the public service, for the public good, should be controlled by the public. We should have all control over the budgeting, over who controls all the budgeting, everything to those aspects. So this, we're trying to turn the power in Albany over from these private companies to people like you and I.
All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right, cool. Okay, we're talking with James, one of the organizers for this public power rally. James, tell us about public power.
Yeah, so public power is an opportunity to take an entity like Con Edison. We're here rallying out in front of their building, which is a for-profit monopoly that serves New York City and the areas outside of it, and is essentially just like steals money from the people and gives it to shareholders and investors. So we want to present an alternative solution, take it over and turn it into something that's publicly owned, democratically controlled, start to really build renewables and start to address climate change and some of the issues that obviously Con Ed is not really incentivized to deal with. So we're here in support of two bills, the New York Build Public Renewables Act and the New York Utility Democracy Act, which will bring us those things.
Awesome. I really couldn't say it any better. That's everything. But I also just wanted to thank James for reaching out to the Bronx Greens to show up to this and show solidarity. Us leftist organizations don't do this enough. We need to work together, especially when we both have the exact same goals, and to make positive change in our communities.
Yeah, for sure. Public power, winning public power is going to take everyone. I'm really glad that you got everyone out here. We were able to work together. I'm hoping to see some more of you guys out of the canvas going forward. We got our next canvas coming up next Sunday, the 18th or so. And yeah, we'll be knocking on doors and talking to people about public power, and hope to see you there.
All right. What is feminism? Feminism is very simply the belief that men and women should be treated equally in this world. And can a man be a feminist? Well, if you're a man and you believe that men and women should be treated equally, then absolutely you can be a male feminist. And what is socialist feminism? Socialist feminism understands that capitalism is a system that creates these unnatural and immoral hierarchies in our society, one being that men are above and superior to women, and that is immoral. So socialist feminism seeks to break that hierarchy so men and women can be treated equally in the society.
I challenge anybody to find one piece of information in the Bible that you can prove to be false.
I mean, let's start with the book of Genesis. When God ordered Abraham to murder his own son, what kind of God would do something like that? Then according to the Bible, the earth is only 6,000 years old. We know that is false. There is no historical evidence that Moses ever lived or that the Jews built the Egyptian pyramids. It's a fairy tale, and if you want to follow it, fine, if it makes you be a better person. But don't push your ideas on the rest of us. This is a recent comment made to me criticizing a recent video I made on the Bible and how false it is, the absurdity of it all. It says, would you listen to a 2-year-old on morality? And as a matter of fact, I might. Being a father, a lot of times children have more morality than adults. They are not ruined by all the evils within our society, meaning the organized religions that teach a false morality, racism, capitalism, imperialism, all the evils that are normalized within our society. A lot of times children are pure, they're honest, and sometimes they could run circles around us by knowing what's right and what's wrong. Sometimes I just like debunking these anti-communist myths because, frankly, I think it's important because a lot of us, including me at one point, believed them. The idea that under socialism, everything would be under state ownership, everyone would work for the government, and that's not true. Every socialist society has participated in something called collectivization, where the workers independently own the means of production. A lot of times it had to do with agriculture. But it is true that at one point in the transition to socialism, the state would expropriate the industry from the capitalists. But what has happened many times is these societies have come under such attack, usually from the United States, that the process has been halted. Socialists are not statists, we're not nationalists, we want the state eventually to wither away. So it's important that we discuss the transition period and that state ownership of everything is only one point in that transition.
Don't overthink this, look in my eye, don't be scared, don't be shy, come on in, the water's fine. You say the ocean's rising like I give a shit.
I don't know how my videos end up on right-wing TikTok. I put a lot of leftist hashtags, but ultimately they do. And you know what? It's fine. I don't have a problem with it. At the end of the day, I don't want to be speaking into a leftist echo chamber. We need to build our movement. So reactionaries are going to see my videos and comment and get angry and do all that, and that's fine. And this statement right here is actually true. With any capitalist organization, the primary goal is to maximize profits. And if you don't maximize profits, you're going to get bought out or go out of business. So they need to maximize profits for shareholders. So they will pay their employees as little as possible. And that's made easier when there's a permanent group of millions of unemployed people that will basically work next to nothing in order to get employment. The permanently unemployed are a huge tool for the capitalists within any capitalist system like ours. This is not the first time I've seen a response like this to one of my videos by a right-winger who somehow found my TikToks through the algorithm, and it's really common, and I can understand it because of the way capitalism works, and American capitalism more specifically. I've been working since I was 15 years old. Right now, I work for my city. I'm in the medical field. I really like my job. I've been there for 14 years. One of the reasons I like it is because I am not getting shareholders rich. It's not perfect, but I like what I do. I serve my community. But I've worked all different kinds of jobs. I worked for big national companies. I worked for small companies, and all of them have been centered around making the owners rich. And when people enter the workforce, they see how much things suck for workers. And a lot of them are like, damn, I gotta join the bourgeoisie. I can't put up with this. And then the other people say, I need to advocate for workers. And that's what I'm doing. This is an excellent statement, but I also want you to imagine this guy starts a business and he wants to treat his workers well. He was in the workforce and he saw how badly workers were treated, and he says, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to treat my workers well. I'm going to give them good benefits. And he's built enough capital, he has investors, and he starts his company. But the competition is stiff, and the investors want him to make changes. And if he doesn't, he's either going to get bought out or go out of business. And he really went into this with the best of intentions. But the way they want him to cut corners is by lowering wages and lowering benefits. And he brought these investors in to divide the risk, but now they have some say in how the company runs. So he lowers benefits, lowers pay, and now he's just another greedy capitalist. And thank you so much for this comment. It's an excellent comment, and that's true. The barista's labor is worthless without the building, the machinery, and the ingredients, all which were built or farmed by workers. All of it. And especially those ingredients that might have been farmed in the global south by people making $2 a day, or maybe even by children, or maybe even by slaves. They could even be working for American companies down there whose shareholders are very happy that they're making such a big profit off of this cheap labor. And let's not forget the engineers who designed the building and the machinery. Engineers are workers, and sometimes they're forgotten because they're very important. And then we have the shareholders who add nothing of value to the company. They put in their investment and they want a return on it by any means necessary.
A lot of you guys like to say that socialism will solve the problem of greed.
I want to thank you for tagging me in this video. There's so much content I would like to address. I'm a former conservative, so I know the arguments. I used to believe the arguments. It was very convenient in this country to agree with all of it because this is the global center of capitalism. But something happens when you read Marxist theory, when you study these revolutions from the perspective of the revolutionaries, you realize everything that we were told is a lie. I want to quote John Maynard Keynes, the famous capitalist economist. He said, "Capitalism is the astounding belief that the most wickedest of men will do the most wickedest of things for the greatest good of everyone." This is a system where the first capitalists were slave traders and slave owners, and it's still based on exploitation. So let's oppose it and build something better. Right-wingers will often say, show me where systemic racism is happening now. Slavery is abolished, Jim Crow is abolished, there's no more systemic racism. And that's not true. As long as we live in a capitalist system, we will have racism. The system that we talk about in systemic racism is capitalism. Capitalism is a hierarchical system with the wealthy ruling capitalist class at the top and the rest of us at the bottom in different levels of hierarchy. And in a country like the United States, people of color, primarily Black, Hispanic, indigenous people, will be towards the bottom. The system requires that. If we abolish capitalism, would racism automatically disappear? No. But an anti-capitalist system would not encourage and feed upon racism. It would not require racism to keep us divided. Because the last thing the ruling class wants us to be is united and focusing our attention on them. American news media is reporting today that there have been massive protests in Cuba against the government. They are demanding that conditions improve. This country has been under an economic embargo for the past 70 years and people are tired of it. What our media does not report that in countries like Chile, Colombia, Haiti, and recently Peru, there have been even bigger protests against their governments, which are capitalist neo-colonies of the United States. Some of these countries have even worse poverty rates than Cuba and are not under decades of an economic embargo. Many people in the United States don't know this, but the Cuban president is allowed to serve 2 5-year terms. Their president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, is in his first of possibly 2 terms. You cannot shoot a man in the leg and then blame him for being shot in the leg. So lift the embargo and let's see how socialism really works. In 2019, I went to Cuba. I wanted to see for myself a socialist country. I'd been a socialist myself for a while. I wanted to speak to the people. I wanted to know if they felt oppressed. I wanted to know if they felt that they lacked democracy. What I found amazed me. Right before I went, they ratified their new constitution that was written starting at the local level and voted all the way up to the national level, where 90% of the people voted to maintain socialism and continue their struggle for socialism. I found a people that were so intelligent and understood that the majority of the problems in their country were due to decades of embargo. Now compare that to the United States, where our Constitution was written over 200 years ago and was written by a bunch of wealthy slave owners who wanted to maintain power and keep the power out of the hands of the working people as much as possible. I say again, if you really oppose socialism, tell our government to lift the embargo so we could really see if socialism doesn't work. I could partially agree with this statement. I mean, imagine a thriving socialist society just 90 miles off the coast of the United States where people's needs are met. They have a fully functioning democracy, more workers' rights. I mean, imagine the US just letting that happen. But it's not just about proximity, because the United States has done this in faraway parts of the world too, mainly Asia, the Middle East. So it's about brown people, it's about the global South, it's about the Cuba being a former neo-colony of the United States and not letting them thrive and get away from our imperialism. A lot of people don't know this, but right now Portugal is being run by a coalition between the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, and the Green Party. And we don't hear about that so much here because it's a white European country and they can do whatever they want. A lot of us in the US confuse socialism with liberalism. Socialism is not meant to help capitalism. It's meant to replace capitalism with a better system. Liberal policies are meant to help capitalism. One of the reasons that we have an explosion of homelessness and poverty across the United States is that about 40 years ago, we abandoned Keynesian economics. From the Great Depression to around the early 80s, the US used an economic strategy called Keynesian economics, which is a much more regulated version of capitalism, and it worked pretty well. But since we've abandoned Keynesianism, we've seen an explosion in poverty, homelessness, addiction, and all the other things that come along with deregulated capitalism. We could talk about homelessness in California, but we can also talk about the fact that the poorest states in the country are all Republican-led states. So what can we do? We can either regulate capitalism again, or we can change to a better system. Yeah, thank you so much for the comment. This is a very common misconception that a lot of people have, that we are just utopians, we are idealists. We are actually the opposite. We are materialists. We take a scientific approach to society, to human nature, to the economy. You could read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific by Friedrich Engels to further understand our approach to scientific socialism and applying these principles to society. And just the human nature argument, I understand it. Humans are complex creatures. A part of our human nature is to exploit, is to hurt each other. And capitalism is a system that is based on that exploitation, based on harming and hurting other people. So we shouldn't have a system based on that. Marx and other socialist revolutionaries wrote a lot about that. If we read their books and we read about their experiences implementing these ideas, we can learn a lot. Socialism works.
What Biden support? You guys don't support Biden. You just support the fact that Trump is out of office.
Wow, I kind of agree with this. I mean, I don't agree with pretty much anything Trump supporters say, but I guess sometimes they're like a broken clock. They're right twice a day. I don't know any Biden supporters, even of my liberal friends. Nobody supports Biden. Nobody really likes Biden. They just didn't want Trump. Biden is a war criminal. He wrote the '94 crime bill. In the 70s, he supported segregation. Biden is horrible. And I am not a Biden supporter. I supported a socialist candidate in the 2020 election because I don't believe in settling for the lesser of two evils. Settling for the lesser of two evils got us Joe Biden as a Democratic candidate. And it will continue to get worse as we continue to settle for the less of two evils. When I see comments like this from capitalist apologists, it just shows me that these people don't know that there are different capitalisms. Capitalism in the global south is much different than what we have up here in the global north, in the imperial core, especially for colonizers. Capitalism in the global south is a system of oppression. There is such high poverty, such high exploitation, and then a centralized group of oligarchs, similar to what we have here, but much, much worse. The poverty, the crime, and these countries are not under dozens and dozens of sanctions putting people under poverty. It's just capitalism. And then we have socialist countries like Cuba that actually have higher literacy, better education, better healthcare, better quality of life than a lot of countries that are capitalists that don't have sanctions. It's pretty amazing, and it shows socialism is a better system. Hey guys, Bronx Prole here. I just want to let you all know something that some of you might not know, that these are Cuban doctors, and when there's a global health crisis, Cuba sends these doctors all around the world to countries that are in need, that are having a hard time taking care of their people during a public health crisis. So as Cuban doctors were going around the world, risking their lives, saving lives, the United States put them back on the state sponsors of terror list. They also increased sanctions that are now causing so many food and medication shortages and added to why people are protesting there right now. If this is not cruelty, I don't know what is. Just last week, the UN voted again to ask the United States to end the blockade. See, how the blockade works is that any country or company that trades with Cuba will be fined and barred from trading with the United States. So again, tell your friends, demand the end of the blockade. I could totally understand why someone would want that. I mean, we had it in the New Deal, and it felt like a nice compromise between the workers and the ruling class when we got some more scraps, some more worker protections, bigger welfare state, and the ruling class could have power over us. And it works in Europe and parts of Scandinavia as well pretty well. The problem is that the United States is the global center of capitalism, so all the contradictions within capitalism are heightened here. These social democratic policies really only lasted a couple decades until they were repealed. Even in 1947, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed to take a lot of power away from unions. So let's have a system that doesn't keep power in the oligarchy. Let's have a system that puts power into the working class. It's really not that scary of a thing. We can govern better ourselves than having sociopaths rule over us. A lot of people say social democracy or regulated capitalism is the best compromise. It's the way to be. But let's look at what happened with the New Deal. Those policies only lasted for a few decades, and then they were repealed. Why were they repealed? Because capitalism is a system that requires growth, nonstop, constant, forever growth. And when brakes and limits are put on that growth, the people who own these companies and capitalism as a system fights that tooth and nail. In the human nature argument, I talk about this a lot, but a lot of times when I see people saying this, I say, speak for yourself. What does this say about you? Because I'm not going around trying to hurt and exploit and extort people. Socialist and communalist societies have existed throughout time and have done very well, especially when they were not under constant attack. So instead of once again saying, please give me more scraps, please ruling class, let's take the power and govern ourselves.
All to see without my eyes. The first time that you kissed me, boundless by the time I cried. I built your walls around.
Right, they have a dictatorship with a president who can serve 2 5-year terms, who was elected by the people. They don't have an electoral college. Their elections are won by popular vote. They have no super delegates. When you go to vote in Cuba, you use a paper ballot, and that ballot box is protected by 2 children. Because are you really going to steal or tamper with that ballot box in front of 2 kids? And at the end of the day, the community goes back to the polling station and they watch all the ballots get counted all together. Instead of, like in the United States, running with these 2 phony baloney parties, in Cuba they run on what they believe will help the Cuban people. So yeah, we have a lot to envy with their electoral system. I just want to say that I support anyone's right to protest, to resist, to speak out against their government, and that includes the Cuban people. I know not all the people protesting there want capitalism either. They just want a more fair system, and they want their needs to be met, because that's the promise that socialism tries to give people. I do have personal experience going to Cuba, but that's just my personal experience. And the people that I met there, for the most part, understood that the shortages and the hardship that they face is because of the embargo. But to call it a tyrannical government, I think is unfair. Let's remember what the US did to Japanese Americans when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Only one time. They put all Japanese Americans in concentration camps for the rest of the war. That is tyrannical. That is oppressive. Our aim should be that the embargo be lifted. In a TikTok that I made earlier, I said that a lot of the New Deal reforms that were meant to protect workers have been repealed. Someone in the comments asked me to be a little more specific about what were some of these repeals made. So I'm going to talk about the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947. It gained bipartisan support. It was meant directly to hurt workers and union membership. Under Taft-Hartley, union leadership had to sign an oath saying that they were not a socialist. It also gave southern states specific permission to create right-to-work laws, which we've seen grow all over the country by now. These right-to-work laws dealt a huge blow to the working class. In 1947, wages and union membership were at their very highest in the US. The capitalist class always works by divide and conquer, so a divided workplace always means the workers will be losing. One of the biggest reasons for the Great Depression was that retail banks were doing speculative investing in the stock market. So the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 was created to separate retail banks from investment banks. It worked very well and prevented banks from getting too big and becoming banking monopolies. It was repealed in 1999 under the Clinton administration with bipartisan support. Two high-ranking Democrats who supported the repeal of Glass-Steagall were President Bill Clinton and Senator Joe Biden. Big banks always work hand-in-hand with capital to increase their wealth and power and create monopolies that will 100% of the time hurt the workers. This is another very important New Deal reform that was meant to protect the working class, which has been undone by Republicans and Democrats. So today I'm recording episode 4 of my podcast. I've been on a bit of a hiatus from the podcast. I'll let you guys know what's been going on. My parents both got diagnosed with COVID a few months ago, and while they were in the hospital with COVID, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. Then my father passed away due to the complications of COVID. My wife has been going through cancer treatment. She's doing well and responding. So it's been a bit of a tough time, but we're getting through it, and I'm really excited about my guest today. Her name is Janet. She's a local organizer from around my way. Something that's interesting about her is she's a former libertarian and stockbroker turned socialist, so I think we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're definitely going to go into her journey and how she found libertarianism, how she got out. So I hope you all check it out and enjoy.
Do you think that the military is a good alternative to some people instead of prison?
Absolutely not. The answer to our bloated prison population is not for these people to join the US military, be brainwashed into American exceptionalism and imperialism, and go around the world murdering innocent brown people who are usually poor, and help steal resources and enslave these people for the profit of American corporations. When is the last time that the U.S. military defended our freedom? The U.S. military's job is not to defend our freedom. It is to go around the world and fight for the interest of American companies. And then after they're done with you, they throw you away like garbage.
It's never your successful friends posting the communist quotes.
I'll tell you who's sharing communist quotes. It's the people who understand what is going on in this country and this world to workers. Personally, I'm doing okay. I own a home. I have a car. I have a freaking pool in New York City. I work very hard in my job, and I'm successful. And I'm at one of the few jobs that you can be a worker and be able to afford this. But that's getting less and less in this world. The average worker works in retail, works in food service, works at some Amazon warehouse, and that is the reality for people. Whether you are high school educated, college educated, people with master's degrees are working in retail, working for minimum wage. I want to know how many of you people that consider yourself successful came from wealth, came from privilege, had mommy and daddy helping you, because it's getting harder and harder to come from the bottom and make something of yourself because of neoliberal capitalism. Soon, with the way things are going, it will be impossible. We will be facing Great Depression conditions again if we don't change things and wake up.
So Edwin, tell me what happens when someone with the best of intentions runs for office with the Democratic Party?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris, you might have the best intentions as a progressive, but ultimately the leadership determines the direction of the party. And both corporate parties, Democrat and Republican, don't view healthcare as a human right. So even if your agenda going in as a Justice Democrat was to provide healthcare to all people, ultimately Nancy Pelosi is your master. That's why AOC has called her Mama Bear, because you need to make sure that you take the revolution outside the two-party duopoly if you want material change for the working class, because you can't shoehorn a working class movement into a corporate party. And as you saw with Bernie running for president 2 times, the DNC kneecapped him, rigged the primary against him. We all saw what happened with the Shadow app in Iowa, and Bernie Sanders with...
So I'm just going to talk about my personal experience here. This is not due to surveys or anything like that, but I live in a big city, and I know a lot of people from Eastern Europe. And most of them left Eastern Europe after those countries became capitalist. One friend in particular says, I really wanted capitalism. I looked at the West, I saw all the stuff, I saw all the electronics, I saw all the clothes, I wanted Levi jeans, and I wanted all that stuff. And we didn't have all the commodities that you guys had in Eastern Europe. He was from Romania. And he said once they got capitalism, they realized what a mistake they had all made. Because that's when he saw all the homelessness, all the joblessness, all the poverty that comes with capitalism. There's a price to pay to get all that stuff. And then they all had to move to America because the economy became so bad after capitalism. I get it. Why can't we just have a kinder, gentler, softer type of capitalism? It seems to work in other countries, and it's much better than what we have here, but we tried that here. We had the New Deal, and it was better. Things were more stable. The working class had more wealth and stability, but those policies only worked for a few years, like maybe 30 or 40, until the late 70s. And then we went to neoliberalism. See, this is the center of global capitalism. You can either have it 2 ways. You can have a ruling class rule over us. You can have the workplace run like a dictatorship, or we can have the people run the workplace democratically. We can either have it 2 ways. You can't have both. And the reason those societies have been so totalitarian is because they were under constant attack from the United States and other Western capitalist countries. It won't be like that once we are socialist. This is a really great question, and I know a lot of people have this fear that we would look like China, we would look like Russia. And the answer is absolutely not. Socialism is based on a principle called dialectical materialism. Our socialist society would look nothing like China or Russia. It would be based on our material needs and our culture. They call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. Well, our socialism might be socialism with American characteristics. And ultimately, if the people don't want socialism, we're not going to have it, because it is a people-driven movement. So until we get tired of living under an economic dictatorship and having the vast majority of our labor value stolen by sociopaths who are now in a space race, we're going to continue to live under capitalism. Yes, this is super important to do, and a lot of people misunderstand these terms like communism, socialism, democratic socialism, social democracy. Communism is a stateless, classless, moneyless, borderless society, and it has never existed. It is an ideal that we hope to reach at some point in the future. So when you hear about communist country, that's really a misnomer, because you can't have a communist country. You can have a socialist country. And what a lot of these countries have done, they've began the transition into socialism towards communism. Part of that transition is the state expropriating capital and industry from the capitalists and then they get under heavy attack by the international capitalist community, and the process kind of gets halted right there. These countries get sanctioned, they get war declared on them, like in Vietnam, the US poisoned their water and food supply, so they struggle a lot. Last week I made a TikTok at a protest in front of AOC's office. It was put together by leftists, it wasn't put together by right wingers. And there are some valid criticisms of AOC squad by the left. And there was a mixed response to that TikTok. The people against us said that we were attacking her. There's no attacking it. There's no attack. What's important to remember is that socialist ideology is the people's critique of everything. We must critique the people, institutions, and ideas that we support. We must think critically and objectively. When someone is elected into office through a party that opposes every single thing that we want in society, that person is going to face a lot of resistance. We know that. So we want to hold them accountable and know we have not forgotten what we put them into office for. Last week I made a TikTok at a protest in front of AOC's office in criticism of her by leftists. I got a mixed response from people. Some people said that we were attacking AOC. That's a very exaggerated term to use for what we were doing. We want to hold our elected officials accountable. When someone is elected into the Democratic Party, that party is going to do everything they can to stop the policies and ideas that we want brought forth into society. We understand AOC has done some good, but nobody is above criticism. Never fall into being an apologist for a person or an idea or an institution. Always think critically.